Have you ever imagined that behind the glittering lights, beneath the clinking of crystal glasses at lavish banquets, lie secrets no one could ever expect? A billionaire disguises himself as a lowly employee to investigate his own restaurant, and what he uncovers is not just corruption, but a silent hero, an aging dishwasher, his hands trembling with age, yet his heart burning brighter than anyone else's. Don't take your eyes off today's story, because what you're about to witness won't just bring you to tears. It will reignite your belief that even the smallest act of kindness can light up the entire world. Have you ever placed your full trust in something, poured your heart and soul into building it, only to wake up one day with a gnawing unease deep inside you? As if something at the very core was starting to rot, and you couldn't explain why. David Blake, the man behind the luxurious culinary empire known as Blake's Bistro, knew that feeling better than anyone. On the outside, he was the epitome of success, a self-made billionaire, a symbol of New York's elite, the owner of restaurants where culinary excellence met the art of refined hospitality. Beneath dazzling Swarovski chandeliers, patrons raised glasses of vintage French wine as smooth jazz whispered through opulent spaces. Etched on the wall of every location was the golden motto, "Where elegance meets heart." David had lived and breathed those words for years. From a humble corner in Manhattan, he had built a dazzling kingdom. 4 flagship restaurants, each one a jewel on the city's culinary map. But when the media's flashing cameras turned toward his latest financial reports, David noticed something far more frightening than numbers. Revenue was steady. Reservations had never slowed. The lavish soirees continued as always. Yet buried in the lines of those reports was a silent fracture. Operating costs were climbing without explanation. Profit margins were thinning like mist in the morning. Most alarming of all, at his very first location, his pride and joy, the birthplace of every success story, staff turnover had reached an unprecedented high. At first, he blamed the market. Maybe it was just bad timing, maybe a temporary shift. But every night, as the city lit up, the doubts crept back in, like shadows slipping under the cracks of a closed door. He could summon the board. He could schedule urgent meetings with regional managers. But David Blake wasn't a conventional executive. He knew, if you want the truth, you have to go where it's being hidden. Without a word to anyone, David tucked away his bespoke Seville rose suit. He removed his rare Patek Philippe watch from his wrist. In their place, the simple uniform of a new hire and a faded baseball cap dusted with the weight of time, just like the journey he was about to embark on. When David stepped through the glass doors of the original Blake's Bistro, memories hit him like a slow-motion reel. Italian silk tablecloths, pressed to perfection. Crystal baccarat glasses catching light from the chandeliers. The rich aroma of Ethiopian coffee floated gently through the refined air. But beneath all the beauty, he felt a biting coldness. Not a single welcoming glance. Not a single warm smile like in the old days. The gestures that once defined the soul of this place were now robotic, rehearsed, and lifeless. David quietly took a seat at the marble bar on an Italian leather stool and ordered an espresso, not to savor it, but to observe. And when that bitterness touched his tongue, his heart sank even deeper than the coffee's sharp notes. What was decaying at the heart of his empire? Once, every employee had called this place home. Every glance, every gesture brimmed with pride. Now it was all a glittering shell, hollow and cold. The cracks were widening, and David Blake, the man who had laid every foundational stone of this empire, made a silent vow. I will uncover the truth, no matter how well it's hidden, even if I have to tear down every wall I once built with my own hands. On his first trial day, under the disguise of a new hire at Blake's Bistro, David walked down the marble-tiled hallway with slow, deliberate steps. Yet inside, a storm was raging. He paused in front of a mirror, adjusting the collar of his uniform to make it neater. The crisp white shirt, tailored from high-quality bamboo fiber, now carried a far heavier weight on his shoulders, the burden of a truth waiting to be exposed. The atmosphere in the restaurant was stifling that day. The screech of chairs dragging, the clatter of cutlery against porcelain. Each sound clashed like an off-key symphony. The stares from the staff were like invisible blades, cutting with every step David took. Assigned to the lounge area, where elite guests sipped fine wine before dinner, David took on his role as a new server. And almost instantly, something unexpected happened. A difficult customer dropped a baccarat crystal glass, sending shards flying across the marble floor. No one moved to help. The other staff exchanged hesitant glances, frozen. Sensing an opportunity to observe, David quickly knelt down and began picking up the shards, only to notice a disapproving glare from behind the bar. It was Chad, the man in charge of the rare wine section, watching him with a look that said, "You just broke the unspoken rule. Don't react to minor incidents." Chad scanned David from head to toe, suspicion in his eyes. "You the new guy? You look kind of familiar." David's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't afford even the slightest slip. With a calm tone honed from years in the boardroom, he responded with a humble smile. "Yes, just started today. I'm honored to learn from experienced professionals like you." Chad narrowed his eye as if trying to pierce through the disguise, but then shrugged. "Just don't cause trouble. We've got our own way of doing things around here." Vanessa, Chad's accomplice, chimed in with a cold, sugary smile. "And remember this, don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong." Her voice was sweet as honey but sharp as ice. David held back his emotions, carefully memorizing every glance, every gesture. Later, while serving a VIP table, David stumbled upon something strange. The wine inventory log had been delicately altered, handwriting scratched out, numbers overwritten in different ink. The invoice book showed suspicious blank spaces, as if someone had left room for shady transactions to be filled in later. By the end of the shift, with the guests mostly gone, David caught a hushed conversation in a shadowy corner near the wine cellar. Chad and Vanessa were whispering about a missing shipment and a plan to pin it on someone else. His pulse raced. It was as if the dark puzzle pieces were slowly assembling into a sinister picture. But he knew now was not the time to act. Outside the glass windows, the lights of Manhattan sparkled like shattered diamonds in the night. David looked up at the chandelier above, its crystal light glowing brightly, and thought to himself, "You may hide behind all this glitter, but the darkness inside you, sooner or later, will be brought to light." Ahead lay a labyrinth of traps. But David Blake, the man who built this empire from nothing, would walk into that maze head held high. And this was only the beginning. Not long after stepping into the shadowy maze that Blake's bistro had become, David found his attention drawn to a man who, at first glance, seemed utterly unremarkable in this glittering world of chandeliers and polished marble. Frank Miller, the oldest dishwasher in the restaurant, with rough, weathered hands and a hunched back shaped by time. He wore a faded chef's coat, immaculately pressed, and an apron worn at the edges but spotless. Frank moved gently among towers of Versace dishes and baccarat glasses, as if he were conducting an invisible chamber orchestra. Every movement had its own rhythm, precise, dignified, as if he were preserving some deep, unspoken value no one else around him seemed to notice. David stood silently, watching. In Frank's eyes, he saw no exhaustion, no bitterness, only a strange calm, the serenity of a man who had accepted hardship as a natural part of life. Then it happened. A young woman, Emily Carter, walked into the restaurant carrying her little daughter. Both were modestly dressed, trying their best to look neat, but there was no hiding the quiet struggle in their lives. After their meal, at the payment counter, Emily grew flustered as her credit card was declined. Her face paled with shame, while her daughter clutched her hand tightly, eyes filled with a heartbreaking worry. None of the experienced staff stepped forward. Chad and Vanessa stood behind the cashier's desk, cold eyes watching, lips curled in smug disdain. And then, Frank quietly set down his dish towel and walked toward the counter as if drawn by an invisible thread. No grand gestures. No words are needed. He simply reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a few crumpled bills, worn but carefully kept, and placed them gently on the marble countertop. "Take this, young lady, Frank said, his voice as warm and steady as a late afternoon breeze. "Save what's left for your daughter's breakfast tomorrow." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She gripped her daughter's hand and whispered a tearful thank you. David felt something tighten in his chest. He had witnessed countless moments of wealth and poverty in his career, but this small, noble act struck the deepest chord in his heart. And yet, tragedy lurked in the background. Frank had no idea he was becoming a target. Chad and Vanessa exchanged a sinister glance. Chad muttered under his breath with poisonous intent. Perfect, one more excuse to pin it all on the old man. David heard every word. Each syllable cut through him like a blade. And it didn't stop there. After closing time, David happened to overhear Vanessa's mocking advice as Frank cleaned the last trays. "You keep helping people like that. Aren't you afraid of getting fired one day? This is a fine dining restaurant, not a saint's shelter." Frank just gave a sad smile and said nothing. But David couldn't stay silent, not in his heart. He realized then Frank wasn't just a dishwasher. Frank was the mirror reflecting the soul Blake's Bistro once had. Humble, honorable, quietly devoted. And from that moment on, David swore he would not only protect Frank from the cruel scheme unfolding, he would restore the very heart of the empire he once took pride. Frank's not just washing dishes, David told himself, eyes gleaming with resolve. He's the last keeper of this place's conscience, and I will not let that flame go out. The air in the restaurant felt heavier than ever, like the hush before a storm. And David knew the real storm was still coming. That night, after Blake's Bistro had closed and the glamorous lights dimmed one by one, David didn't head home. Something told him that the answers he was searching for, the rot threatening the foundation of his empire, could somehow be found in the quiet figure of Frank Miller. Frank left the restaurant with a faded canvas bag slung over his shoulder, walking slowly through the chilly wind that swept between Manhattan's majestic buildings. But what broke David's heart wasn't how Frank walked. It was where he was walking to. Frank didn't go home. He passed glittering avenues, slipped quietly between rows of luxury cars, and finally stopped at a dark corner of a public parking garage. Among the polished Bentleys and blacked-out limos sat an old, weathered Bentley, its once proud silver now dulled and dust-covered, a relic of better days. Frank opened the back door and slowly climbed inside, like stepping into a room long familiar. He draped a thin blanket over his frail shoulders and bowed his head beneath the flickering glow of the street lamp. David stood frozen in the shadows, a coldness creeping down his spine that even the harsh winter wind couldn't compare to. He watched Frank, the man who had quietly served day after day, without complaint, now seeking shelter in the decaying memories of a life he once lived. But David wasn't ready to stop there. The next morning, he sought out Mr. Johnson, a longtime customer he had often noticed sharing quiet, respectful glances with Frank. "Frank," Johnson's voice rasped, a deep sorrow flickering behind his eyes. "You sure you want to know?" Frank once had everything, Johnson began slowly. A small home on Maple Street, a gentle wife, a peaceful future with a daughter he loved more than life itself. David listened, unmoving. But then tragedy came. Johnson continued, his tone darkening. His wife fell seriously ill. Frank sold the house, sold everything of value, including their wedding ring. All he wanted was one more day with the woman he loved. David swallowed hard, his chest tightening painfully. And do you know what the saddest part is? Johnson gripped the armrest of his chair. He's never told his daughter the truth. Still sends her photos of himself in that clean uniform. Still tells her he's a restaurant manager, just so she can focus on her studies out in Seattle, believing her dad is doing just fine. David leaned back, eyes burning. But the surprises weren't over yet. Johnson pulled out an old phone and handed it to David, showing the latest text messages Frank had sent his daughter. "My sweet girl, I just finished another busy day managing the restaurant. We had so many guests today, but don't worry, Dad's doing great. Just focus on your studies." David's hand trembled as he read those words. A father shielding his child from the weight of his suffering, building a beautiful illusion just to protect her hope in the future. But there was still more. When David asked about Frank's deeper past, Mr. Johnson shared a memory that struck like a bolt of lightning. You know why Frank chose to work at Blake's Bistro? He leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. Because this restaurant used to be the little diner where he and his wife went on their first dates. To him, this place wasn't just a job. It was sacred. It was where the memories of his love still lived. That single sentence pierced David's heart like a blade. Frank wasn't working to survive. He was living to keep a flame alive. At that moment, David saw clearly. Frank was more than a valuable employee. He was the last flickering soul of Blake's Bistro, the only one keeping its humanity from being extinguished by greed and deceit. David clenched his fists. His eyes burned, not from tears, but from a fire being reignited deep within him. "Frank, you've been carrying the flame for this place for too long," David whispered. "Now it's my turn. I'll light the whole sky for you." He knew what had to be done. To save Frank, and to save Blake's Bistro, David would have to chase the truth to its bitter end. And the war against the ghosts of his own empire was only just beginning. David Blake was no longer a silent observer. After everything he had seen, he was ready to act, not with the brute force of a powerful CEO, but with the precision of a man who had built an empire from nothing. He had to dismantle the filthy scheme Chad and Vanessa had so carefully spun. But to trap the predators, they first had to believe they were the ones in control. David began by quietly reaching out to Emily Carter, the young mother Frank had once helped. When he found her, Emily was working the night shift at a small bakery in the suburbs, exhausted, yet still trying to smile. David spoke gently, his tone earnest. "Emily, I need your help to expose the truth. Not just to repay Frank, but to protect people like you, like him, from those who exploit the vulnerable." Emily looked at him, hesitant at first, then nodded, eyes steady. "I'll do it." The plan was crafted like a masterstroke in a life-or-death chess game. Emily would return to the restaurant with her daughter, pretending to have forgotten her wallet and claiming her bank account had been frozen. Frank, with his instinct to help, would almost certainly step in again, just as he had before. Chad and Vanessa, predatory by nature, would think they had another incident to use against him. But this time, David had installed discreet micro-cameras in hidden corners of the restaurant. A team of technicians was monitoring everything in real time. That evening, the restaurant was packed. The chandeliers sparkled like suspended stars, the ambience elegant but tight, like a wire stretched to breaking. Emily arrived, holding her daughter's hand. She tried to look flustered, her gaze lowered. Wealthy diners glanced at them with indifference, barely veiled judgment. Chad sneered. Vanessa nudged him with a smirk. "Look at that, another pawn handed to us on a silver platter." Emily ordered the simplest items on the menu, a seafood soup and a small pasta for her daughter. When it was time to pay, she fumbled at her purse, face full of false panic. I'm so sorry. I think my card was locked." Vanessa seized the moment, raising her voice for the entire room to hear. "We don't serve charity cases here, ma'am." All eyes in the restaurant turned toward them. Frank, from behind the counter, immediately dropped what he was doing and stepped forward. Without hesitation, he pulled out a few crumpled bills from his pocket. "Let me cover it. Please, don't make a scene." From a quiet corner table, David gripped the armrest of his chair. He knew it. This was the moment. The prey had taken the bait. Chad discreetly jotted down the incident in his forged logbook. Vanessa made sure the shift manager, Lisa, noticed what was happening. "It's him again. Lisa, I'm afraid we've got a serious issue with the cash drawer." Everything was unfolding exactly as David had predicted. After dinner, David pulled out his phone and gave the signal. The hidden cameras had captured it all. The malicious glint in Chad's eye, the sly hand of Vanessa as she concealed money off record. And that wasn't all. David had already reconstructed past suspicious transactions from the digital management system, cross-referenced and reinforced with footage from earlier camera logs. Checkmate was coming. Just one final move. Lisa, the shift manager, stepped out from the office holding a report. Her face was pale. "It seems we've had another cash discrepancy." Chad and Vanessa exchanged a glance, smug, triumphant. But what they didn't know, the heavy atmosphere wasn't because people feared Frank. It was because the truth, ugly, undeniable, was about to erupt. David rose from his seat, adjusted his collar, and his eyes sharpened like blades. It's time for the curtain to fall. The masquerade was nearing its end. The audience, customers, staff, and those who had unknowingly been pawns in a wicked play, was about to witness the most stunning reveal in the history of Blake's Bistro. And in David's heart, a single thought blazed. Tonight, justice will be restored, and the fire of compassion will rise again. The air inside Blake's Bistro had grown thick and heavy. All eyes were fixed on the cashier counter, where Lisa, the shift manager, held a printout of the cash report, her face taut with tension. Chad and Vanessa stood beside her, trying to mask their triumph, though the icy glint in their eyes betrayed it. They believed the trap had snapped shut around Frank. The perfect move. They could already picture him being dragged out in shame. Lisa raised her voice, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. We've detected a cash shortage, and it appears that. Chad cut in, feigning concern but unable to hide his sly tone. We've suspected it for a while now. Frank has repeatedly paid for customers out of pocket without logging it properly. A suffocating silence fell over the room. Frank stood still, his shoulders quivering slightly, but his gaze remained calm, as if he'd grown accustomed to the weight of false accusations. And then a deep, commanding voice rang out from the back of the room. That's enough. All heads turned instantly toward the source. David Blake stepped forward from the shadows, removing his modest server's jacket to reveal a tailored suit underneath, his face unmistakable. Gasps and whispers rippled through the room. Oh my God, it's Mr. Blake, the CEO of Blake's Bistro. Chad and Vanessa went ghostly pale. Their fake confidence disintegrated in an instant, like a mask ripped away in a storm. David walked forward, his gaze piercing through the two traitors. He didn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone silenced the entire room. He raised one hand, and instantly, the large screen in the center of the restaurant, usually used to display fine wine menus, switched to a hidden video feed captured by his tech team. The footage was crystal clear. The audio, chilling. Chad pocketed cash during inventory checks. Vanessa voided transactions at the register and slipped the money into her purse. Their whispered conspiracies echoed across the room. Keep it safe. Let Frank take the fall. That old man won't be able to defend himself. The room erupted in outrage. Lisa nearly dropped the report in shock. Frank stood frozen, tears brimming in his weary eyes. But David wasn't finished. And now, he said, switching to the second clip, here's Frank, spending his own humble wages to help customers in need. The screen showed Frank pulling crumpled bills from his pocket, quietly laying them on the counter. His face was kind. His eyes are full of compassion. No hesitation. No shame. A slow clap rose from one corner of the room, then another and another. Soon, the entire restaurant was on its feet, applauding in waves. Frank had been vindicated. Just then, the doors opened. Police officers stepped in as scheduled. David gave a nod. A firm voice rang out. Chad and Vanessa, you are under arrest for breach of trust and embezzlement. Chad squirmed, pale as chalk. No, this isn't me. I was framed. Vanessa burst into sobs. Please let me go. I only did what he told me. But the truth no longer needed explanation. The police led them away, past a sea of disgusted and furious stares. Inside the restaurant, the tension lifted like a curtain falling. What remained was a sense of release, of restored faith. David turned to Frank. His gaze softened, full of reverence. Frank, you haven't just kept these dishes clean. You've kept the soul of Blake's Bistro pure. And tonight, everyone saw it with their own eyes. Customers and staff rose together in thunderous applause. Frank stood speechless, tears now rolling freely down his cheeks. Tears not of sorrow, but of deep relief and gratitude. Mr. Frank forever. The chant echoed through the restaurant, sealing the moment Blake's Bistro turned a new page. Justice had been served. The darkness had been pushed back, and the light of kindness burned brighter than ever. David knew this was only the beginning of a great rebirth. The applause inside Blake's bistro had yet to fade. It echoed like the rhythm of a triumphant drum, driving away the last remnants of darkness still hiding in the corners of the room. Frank stood silently in the center of the now radiant restaurant, his wrinkled hands trembling as they clutched his old apron to his chest, like a fragile shield against the storm of emotion swelling within him. David stepped forward. His eyes no longer held the icy sharpness of someone exposing deception. Now, they glowed with pride and reverence. "Frank," David began, his warm voice filling the room, "these hands of yours didn't just keep this restaurant clean. They kept this place kind. They kept it honest." The room fell still. Everyone held their breath. David turned to Lisa, the shift manager, who now stood with her head bowed, deeply remorseful. She stepped forward and handed David a thick envelope and a sleek, polished key resting inside a velvet box. "Today," David continued, "we're not just clearing your name, Frank. We want you to lead Blake's Bistro into its new era." He opened the envelope and pulled out a letter printed on elegant, embossed paper bearing the Blake's Bistro logo. "Frank Miller, as of today, you are officially appointed as Chief Operating Officer of Blake's Bistro." The room exploded in thunderous applause. Frank stood stunned, his lips trembling, his eyes wide in disbelief. But David wasn't done yet. He lifted the velvet box and opened it before the gathered crowd. "And this, Frank, it isn't just a title. It's a gift from the entire restaurant community. That old Bentley you've been sleeping in, it's being replaced with a fully furnished apartment just steps from here. And yes, it's already paid for." The clapping turned to cheering. A few employees burst into tears. Emily Carter, the young mother Frank had once helped, ran up and hugged him tightly. "Mr. Frank, you've helped so many in silence. Now it's our turn to help you." Frank choked back a sob. Tears streamed down his lined face. His voice cracked. I don't know what to say. I only did what I thought was right." David smiled, placing a firm hand on Frank's shoulder. "And that's exactly why it matters, Frank. People like you are the reason this place isn't just a fine dining restaurant. It's a home for all of us." The room erupted once more in a standing ovation. But David still wasn't finished. He stepped up to the podium, his eyes scanning every face in the room. "Blake's Bistro won't stop here. Today, I'm proud to announce the creation of the Frank Miller Fund, a monthly contribution from every one of our branches, dedicated to supporting employees and customers in times of hardship." The crowd roared with emotion. People rose to their feet, raising glasses in a unified toast, no longer divided by status or position. Bosses and staff, patrons and servers, all as one, honoring a living symbol of compassion. Frank stood in the center of that glittering room. For the first time in his life, he felt the full warmth of community. The old blanket was gone. In its place was a mantle of love and respect from hundreds of grateful hearts. David's final words rang out, voice full of feeling. "Tonight, we didn't just save Blake's Bistro. We remembered why it exists in the first place. To be a place where kindness lives on every plate and at every table." The restaurant burst into cheers. Lights sparkled like stars across a night sky, shining down into the hearts of everyone present. And then, in that breathtaking moment, Frank smiled. His eyes shimmered with joy as he whispered, This is home." Weeks after that historic night, Blake's Bistro reopened with a brand new spirit. It wasn't just the polished paint or the dazzling chandeliers glistening brighter than ever. It was something deeper, a fresh current of life coursing through every corner. From long tables draped in spotless white cloths to fresh flowers blooming proudly in every vase. The entire space felt like it was breathing again, with more heart than ever before. That morning, a crowd had gathered at the front door, but not for lavish meals or fine wines. They came to witness a rebirth. The transformation of a once flashy restaurant into a powerful symbol of compassion. David Blake stood beside Frank, now dressed in a sharp, tailored suit. The COO badge gleamed on Frank's chest, but what truly shined was the look in his eyes, peaceful, steady, and filled with pride. Old and new staff members stood among loyal patrons, some of whom had once turned away in disappointment, now returning with warm smiles on their faces. David addressed the crowd. Today, we're not just celebrating the return of Blake's Bistro. We're celebrating something far greater, the return of kindness and of trust. Applause erupted. David turned to Frank, who stood tall and grounded, like a captain at the helm of a steady ship. Frank, would you please share a few words with our new family? Frank stepped forward, scanning the sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces, all now connected by something real. He took a deep breath, his eyes glistening slightly, but his voice was strong. I used to believe I was just someone in the background, quietly doing the smallest job in the kitchen. But I've come to learn, there is no small job when you put your heart into it. The crowd listened, spellbound. Blake's Bistro isn't just a place to eat. It's a place where, when someone falls, someone else reaches out and helps them up. A place where kindness isn't seen as weakness, but as the greatest strength we have. Applause swelled again, like a wave breaking into the shore. Frank paused, then smiled with heartfelt emotion. And today, as your new Chief Operating Officer, I make you this promise. This will always be a home for those who need a helping hand. Cheers erupted. Tears welled in the eyes of many. Emily Carter stepped forward, holding her daughter's hand. She placed a small card into Frank's palm. Mr. Frank, thank you for teaching my daughter her very first lesson in kindness. Frank accepted it, heart overflowing. David stepped up beside him, lifting a glass of wine high. From this day forward, let this place be more than Blake's Bistro. Let it be a beacon of light in the darkest of times. Everyone raised their glasses and echoed in unison. To Frank Miller, to the new Blake's Bistro. Sunlight streamed through the magnificent windows, casting a golden glow on Frank's face, on David's, and on every smiling guest in the room. In that breathtaking moment, the restaurant was no longer just a building of concrete and steel. It had become a living symbol of rebirth, of goodness, and of the unbreakable spirit of humanity. Frank gazed out at the crowd bathed in morning light, and with a soft, trembling smile, whispered, "We really can change the world. All it takes is one small act of kindness." If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it to help spread the spirit of Frank Miller. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us of what truly matters. Maybe after watching this story, you, like me, will begin to see life a little differently. Behind every ordinary face we pass by each day, there might be a silent hero like Frank. He taught us something simple, yet profound. Never underestimate the power of kindness, because it is kindness that becomes the flame, illuminating even the darkest corners. If today's story touched your heart, please share this video to help spread that inspiration. And don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story so you never miss another story that moves, uplifts, and transforms. The story of Frank Miller isn't just about truth being revealed or justice being served. It is living proof of the enduring power of quiet goodness. Frank wasn't wealthy. He didn't hold a fancy title at the restaurant, but it was his humble actions, helping a young mother, sharing his modest wages, and holding on to integrity in a place full of temptation, that lit the way when an entire team had lost its direction. His story reminds us that no matter who you are or how small your role may seem, kindness always matters. And when you protect that kindness, you can change the world around you. Most importantly, the greatest reward isn't applause, but knowing that your goodness has inspired others to live better. We can all be a Frank Miller in this life. All it takes is this: never stop believing in the value of kindness. If that message speaks to your heart, be sure to subscribe to Toch Story for more true stories that shine a light in the darkest places and remind us of the best in humanity.